I never thought something like this would happen to me, especially not in my own neighborhood. You know, the place where you plant your flowers, wave to your neighbors, and finally feel like you can breathe easy. That's what I thought I was walking into when I moved into my new home. A fresh chapter. A peaceful little street lined with trimmed hedges, morning walkers, and the occasional barbecue on weekends. But I quickly learned that sometimes the trouble doesn't come with sirens or storms. It comes wearing pastel cardigans and clutching a clipboard. Now, I don't know about you, but I've always believed that being neighborly just means treating folks with respect. A simple good morning, a little patience, and minding your own business go the long way. But apparently, not everyone lives by that rule. Because just 2 weeks after moving in, I met the neighborhood's self-declared queen. Let's call her Karen. And let me tell you, this woman had a nose for drama and a heart colder than my freezer in January. She showed up the first time like she was on some official business. Walked straight up my driveway like she was inspecting a crime scene. Didn't smile, didn't say welcome, just squinted at my welcome mat like it personally offended her. I remember it so clearly. She glanced around, then said, "You're new, right? Just so, we have very specific rules here, and we take them very seriously." Now, I hadn't even unpacked half my boxes, and here she was warning me about the placement of my trash bin and the unauthorized wind chimes on my porch. I laughed at first. I thought she was joking. I mean, wind chimes? That's the battle she wanted to fight? But she was dead serious. Said it disrupted the visual harmony of the block. I told her I'd keep it in mind and went back inside thinking that'd be the end of it. But oh no, that was just the opening act. Over the next few days, it was like I had a shadow. She'd stroll past my house twice a day, notebook in hand, eyes darting around like a hawk. One afternoon, I saw her measuring my lawn with a little tape measurer. Who does that? I thought maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe she's just one of those overly involved neighbors. But then came the letter, slipped under my door like a secret threat. Violation notice. Yard decor not in compliance. Yard decor? I had 2 ceramic flower pots and a little wooden frog statue my grandkids gave me. That was it. But according to Karen, my frog was not HOA approved. I didn't even know frogs needed clearance. I'll be honest. I laughed at first, but it kept coming. Next it was the color of my porch light. Then my mailbox being too unique. Then a supposed noise complaint, even though I hadn't had so much as a radio playing since I moved in. And every single note wasn't signed, but written in the exact same neat little handwriting that matched her clipboard notes. Now here's where it gets ridiculous. One morning, I woke up to a letter taped to my front door, bold red letters across the top. Eviction warning. Final notice. You can imagine my confusion. I don't rent. I own. And I pay my dues on time like everyone else. But Karen had filed an anonymous complaint, said I was disruptive, non-compliant, and a hazard to community standards. A hazard? Me. A retired teacher who spends most afternoons feeding the birds and watering marigolds. I started to feel like I was in a strange reality show. Like the camera crew was about to jump out and say, "Gotcha." But no, it was real. And I was mad. Not just because of the nonsense, but because I knew exactly what this was really about. See, Karen wasn't just worried about rules or decor. She didn't like that I wasn't falling in line. I wasn't groveling for approval or asking permission to hang a flag on my porch. And people like her, they thrive on control. They want everything and everyone to fit neatly in their little box. And when you don't, they try to push you out of the picture. But what she didn't know, and here's where it gets interesting, is that my Aunt Margie just so happens to be the HOA president. Now, I hadn't mentioned that to anyone when I moved in. I didn't want special treatment. I just wanted to settle in like any normal neighbor. Aunt Margie and I agreed. We'd keep it quiet, keep things professional, and let me handle things on my own like any other homeowner. But this had crossed the line. I called my aunt that evening and told her everything. The letters, the stalking, the fake eviction notice. And she was livid, not just because of what was happening to me, but because Karen had been warned before, multiple times. She had a history of targeting new residents, especially the ones she couldn't boss around. Apparently, I wasn't her first victim, just the first one who had a direct line to the top. Aunt Margie said, It's time we remind Karen who actually runs this neighborhood. And it's not her and her clipboard. And just like that, the game changed. This is just the beginning of a series of events that went from petty complaints to a full-blown neighborhood showdown. So the next morning, my aunt showed up, not in her usual cheerful, cardigan-wearing, garden-loving self, but in full HOA president mode. Let me tell you, there's nothing quite like seeing a sweet woman in her 70s walk into a neighborhood meeting and command the room like a courtroom judge. Calm, polite, but sharp as a tack. She didn't raise her voice, didn't need to. She just had that presence that made people sit up straight and put their phones down. Now, what I didn't know at the time was that Karen had been riding on borrowed time. There had already been 3 formal complaints about her behavior: harassment, intimidation, and even false reporting. But no one had ever dared challenge her directly before. Most folks just put up with her antics to keep the peace. That's the problem in a lot of these HOA-run neighborhoods. People get tired. They don't want to make waves. But sometimes you have to speak up, or else the waves come crashing down on you anyway. That afternoon, my aunt asked me to come along to a special board review she was calling. Just a few of the committee members, nothing big. I didn't know what to expect. I thought maybe it'd be a polite chat, a few stern warnings. But no, it was a showdown. And it started the second Karen walked into that room with her smug little smirk, acting like she had no idea what the meeting was about. "Oh, are we doing another landscaping review today?" she asked, pretending to be casual. Aunt Margie looked up from her notes and said, "No, Karen, we're reviewing your conduct this time." You could have heard a pin drop. Suddenly, that confident little stride slowed down. She sat stiffly in her chair, and for the first time, she didn't have that clipped tone in her voice. My aunt pulled out a file, thick as a Sunday paper, filled with every complaint, every incident, every letter. And right on top was a copy of the fake eviction notice Karen had plastered on my front door. In bold print. Her handwriting. Her little phrases. She didn't even try to deny it. "Oh, I would just try to enforce community standards," she said. But Aunt Margie wasn't having it. She said, "Karen, you don't enforce anything. You're not a board member. You're not security. You're a homeowner like everyone else. And you've been crossing lines that don't belong to you." Then she pulled out something I wasn't expecting, an official censure recommendation. Basically, it meant Karen would be stripped of any authority she thought she had. No more meetings. No more involvement in HOA affairs. And, my favorite part, no more anonymous complaint submissions without review from the board. I sat there in awe, watching this woman who had tried to bully me into leaving, getting held accountable for the first time. And all she could do was sputter and try to change the subject. But it was too late. The board had heard enough. Now, some folks might have let it go right there, but I wasn't done. I wanted to understand why someone like her felt entitled to treat people that way. So I started talking to other neighbors. I learned that Karen had been pulling this mess for years, targeting people over garden flags, patio chairs, even holiday decorations. And not once had anyone really pushed back hard enough to stop her. One neighbor, an older gentleman down the street, told me she'd once filed a complaint because his grandchildren were too noisy while visiting for the weekend. Another woman said Karen demanded she move her flower pots 2 inches to the left because they broke the symmetry of the pathway. And you know what really struck me? So many of them had just given in, not because they agreed, but because they didn't want the drama. They were tired. They'd rather adjust than confront. And that's how people like Karen get their power. It made me think, how many of us have let people like that run unchecked in our lives? Maybe not with HOA rules, but in other areas. That one coworker who always had to feel superior. That one family member who made everything about them. That one neighbor who acted like they owned the whole block. We've all dealt with them. And most of us just grit our teeth and go about our day. But sometimes, just sometimes, the only way to stop a bully is to stand up, call them out, and let them know they don't get to write the rules. After that meeting, something shifted in the neighborhood. People started talking more openly. They weren't whispering about complaints anymore. They were speaking up. There was this sense of relief, like a weight had been lifted. I even had a couple of neighbors come over and thank me for not backing down. One woman said, "I thought I was the only one who couldn't stand her nonsense. But you showed us we don't have to take it." And let me tell you, that meant more to me than any board meeting victory, because it reminded me that no matter how old we are, we still have the right to protect our peace. We don't owe anyone's silence when we're being mistreated. Whether you're 60, 70, or 90, you've earned the right to live in peace without being harassed by someone with a personal vendetta and a clipboard. But just when I thought things were settling down, Karen made one last desperate move that no one saw coming. Not even my aunt. Next will be the moment that changed everything for her and for me. So there I was, thinking the storm had passed. Things had quieted down. Neighbors were smiling more, waving as they walked their dogs, even lingering a little longer during casual chats by the mailbox. You could feel in the air peace, something we hadn't had in a while. Even my aunt seemed lighter, more relaxed. I'd started planting a little herb garden out back, finally enjoying the space the way I'd intended from day one. But you know how life works. Just when you think the dust has settled, someone comes along with a leaf blower full of drama. It was a Thursday afternoon, hot, quiet, nothing unusual. I was inside reading, windows open, just soaking in the breeze when I heard tires crunching gravel a little too quickly. Not the usual slow roll of a neighbor's car. It was aggressive, the kind of sound that says, "I've got a bone to pick." I looked outside and sure enough, there she was. Karen, in her beige sedan, pulling right up to my driveway like she still ran the block. Only this time, she didn't get out with her usual puffed-up posture. She stayed in the car, fiddling with something on her lap. I watched her, curious but cautious. After a minute, she opened the door, stepped out holding a thick manila envelope, and walked straight up to my front door. No knock, no greeting. She just dropped it on a welcome mat and turned to leave. But I wasn't going to let it slide this time. I opened the door and called out, "Hey, Karen, what's this?" She turned slowly, that same tight-lipped smile on her face. "Just some documents you might want to review," she said. I picked up the envelope and glanced inside. Now, I'm no lawyer, but even I could tell this was no HOA matter. It was a stack of legal-looking papers, some kind of personal grievance report, copies of neighborhood ordinance complaints, and even, get this, an anonymous petition signed by supposedly 14 residents calling for my removal from the community. Except half those people had already told me they liked having me around. I recognized the handwriting on some of those names. It was hers, just written differently. It was like watching someone try to stage a one-person coup and failing miserably. I almost laughed, but honestly, it was more sad than funny. This woman had put all her energy into trying to make my life difficult, and now she was grasping at straws. I calmly told her, "This doesn't change anything. You're not in charge here, Karen." And then she said something that made my stomach turn. "We'll see about that," she said cold and flat. That's when I realized this wasn't just about me being new to the neighborhood or not trimming my hedges to her liking. This was personal. It was control. It was entitlement. And in her mind, she couldn't stand that someone had taken the power she thought was hers by default. When my aunt found out, she wasn't surprised. Disappointed, yes, but not surprised. She said, "Some people lose authority and think it's the end of the world. They don't realize peace is better than power." And she was right. But that moment lit a fire in me. Not out of anger, out of purpose. I decided I wasn't going to just let Karen keep operating in the shadows, pulling strings where she had no right. So I took the documents, made copies, and brought them to the next HOA board meeting, this time open to all residents. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make a spectacle. I just stood up, showed everyone the envelope, and said, "This is the kind of manipulation that's been going on, and I think we all deserve better." The room went silent again, but not with fear, with realization. One by one, neighbors started speaking up. People who had been quiet for years started telling their own stories. A man who lived 3 houses down shared how Karen used to stand at his fence line every morning pointing out violations on his property like she was some kind of inspector. Another woman described how Karen had once reported her for having a wind chime that was too loud, even though it barely made a sound. These stories poured out, and for the first time, it didn't feel like gossip or complaints. It felt like truth finally being spoken aloud. The board, with my aunt leading, agreed to take official action. Karen's behavior was formally documented and submitted for a legal review regarding harassment through false complaints. A formal letter was sent notifying her of her final warning before legal consequences would follow. No more anonymous petitions, no more intimidation tactics, no more fake authority. And here's the thing. After that meeting, the community didn't just shift, it transformed. People started checking in on each other. Folks who barely said hello were suddenly organizing small block get-togethers. Someone even put up a little community garden corner near the cul-de-sac where neighbors could swap herbs and flowers. It was like the whole neighborhood had taken a deep breath and decided, let's make this a place where people feel welcome, not watched. Even Karen, believe it or not, faded into the background. She still lived there, but she was quieter, distant. And honestly, that was fine. No one wanted revenge. We just wanted peace. And peace finally had room to breathe. But you know what stuck with me most? It wasn't just that my aunt had my back. It was that standing up for yourself, no matter how old you are, is still worth it. Too often, we're told to keep our heads down, to avoid trouble, to let things go. But sometimes you have to look a bully in the eye and say, not today. Next will be the part that reminded me that sometimes the biggest power move isn't fighting back. It's living your life freely, fully, and joyfully anyway. That moment stayed with me longer than I expected. It's funny how something as simple as standing your ground, just calmly, without shouting or stooping to someone else's level, can shift the entire energy of a place. After everything settled, I realized something even more powerful than seeing Karen quiet down or watching my neighbors come together. It was how I felt inside. Lighter, more rooted, more at home. I kept thinking about how many people go through something similar. Maybe not with an HOA Karen, but would someone try to push them out, make them feel small, or make them question if they even belong in a place they've worked hard to enjoy. Especially as we get older, people assume we'll just let things slide, that we don't have the energy or the will to push back. But I'm here to tell you, don't let anyone take your peace. You've earned it. And that's what this whole story taught me. It's not just about one power-hungry neighbor or some petty neighborhood politics. It's about knowing your worth. It's about protecting your space, not just your house and your yard, but your peace of mind, your dignity, and your joy. That's the part no one should be allowed to chip away at. Now, I still see my aunt regularly. We sit out on the porch, sometimes with some sweet tea or a slice of cake, watching the sunset and chatting about everything from garden mulch to old music. And every now and then, she'll chuckle and say, "Remember when Karen tried to evict you from a house you legally own?" And we laugh, not in a spiteful way, but in that knowing, deep belly kind of laugh that comes when you've walked through the storm and come out dry on the other side. But what really gets me is this. The same people who were once afraid to speak up started to find their voices. One of my neighbors, a sweet older woman who used to just nod and scurry inside whenever Karen walked by, actually ran for a spot on the HOA board herself. And she won. She told me I inspired her. Imagine that, just by standing my ground, I helped someone else believe in their own strength. That's the real victory. Not just silencing the loud ones, but empowering the quiet ones. That's how you build a true community, where folks feel seen, heard, and safe. Where nobody gets to play dictator just because they've got a clipboard and a bad attitude. You know, it's easy to think we're too old to deal with this kind of drama, that we've paid our dues and should just live quietly now. But don't let age make you think your voice doesn't matter anymore. In fact, I'd say it matters more than ever. You've lived. You've seen things. You've earned a right to speak up, to take up space, and to enjoy your home without fear of being targeted by someone with a personal vendetta. So if you're watching this and thinking, that sounds like my situation, let me tell you, you are not alone. Whether you've got a Karen on your block, a board member who thinks they're royalty, or just someone who constantly tries to chip away at your joy, you have every right to stand tall. Don't let them wear you down. Don't shrink to make other people comfortable. And hey, don't be afraid to get a little backup either. I was lucky to have my aunt, sure, but your support can come in different ways. A neighbor, a friend, even your own quiet courage. Whatever it is, lean into it. You don't have to fight dirty. You just have to stand firm. If you've ever dealt with something like this, maybe someone who thought they could control your life or push you out of your own space, I'd love to hear your story. Drop it in the comments. You'd be surprised how many people are going through the same thing, just waiting for someone else to speak up first. You could be that someone. And if you found something helpful in this story, or maybe even just a little bit of encouragement, go ahead and give this video a like. It really helps get the message out to others who might need it. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. I've got more stories, more tips, and more moments just like this to share. Because let's be honest, life doesn't get less interesting after 60. If anything, it gets richer, deeper, and sometimes just a little more entertaining. We still got plenty of fire in us. We've still got stories to tell, fences to mend, and yes, even the occasional HOA drama to laugh about over coffee. But no matter what comes our way, the most important thing is knowing that we're not powerless, not forgotten, not invisible. So here's to standing your ground, speaking your truth, and living with peace, even when the Karens of the world try to make a scene. You deserve to feel safe, valued, and at home. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise. Thanks for spending time with me today. Be kind to yourself. Be good to your neighbors. And above all, don't let anyone steal your joy. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.